Hello, my friends. It's Monday, September 8th, 2025, and I'm your host, Radical Russ Belville, your red state refugee. And welcome to the Radical Russ Show, your home for pothead political punditry, coming to you from Rolla J Studios in Southern Oregon.
It goes down smooth. Hey!
On this week's Smoke Session, Trump wants his War Department to target Chicago to distract from the Epstein victims compiling their own list. RFK Jr. defends his quackery as Trump's cabinet gaslights and propagandizes Americans. Senate Democrats give Trump too much support while Zoran Mamdani keeps winning. Speaker Johnson floats crazy Trump-Epstein theory. Florida ends vaccine mandates. Oregon Republican becomes a Democrat. Updates on suicide, child rape, and transgender athletes in Idaho. And my rant on the open embrace of Nazism in America. But before we get to all this serious political stuff, we've got time for 3 quick hits. All right, first things first, football season is in full effect with high school and college and pros all playing this weekend. And so I'm going to keep you caught up on my football teams and my Lady Loves football teams. My Nampa High School Bulldogs not doing good this season. They're 0-3 and they lost at CUNA 20-12, while my Lady Loves Madison Grant, Indiana Argyles are 3-0 this season, and they just won at home 62-0 against Blackford. So on the high school level, she's kicking my butt. On the college level, Boise State won their first game 51-14 against Eastern Washington, bringing them up to 1-1. Of course, Eastern Washington just an FCS school, so not too much to be proud about there. While the Oregon Ducks went to 2-0 by winning their home game at Autzen Stadium against Oklahoma State, a crushing 69-3. And then at the pro level, both of our teams won their home openers. My Green Bay Packers went to 1-0, winning 27-13 against the Lions, and my Lady Loves Colts went to 1-0, winning 33-8 against the Dolphins. But the big news in the NFL last night was the Sunday night football game. What a way to open the season. The Buffalo Bills were at home against the Baltimore Ravens, and they ended up winning the game. Buffalo did on a walk-off field goal, 41-40 against Baltimore, and this was a Scorigami. If you don't know what that is, a Scorigami is a football score that in all the history of the NFL and all the thousands of games they've played has never happened before. It's the first time in NFL history there was a 41-40 final score. But it's also a perfect example of something we call chasing the points. And I'll tell you what, Buffalo was really lucky to get away with this win, because halfway through the third quarter, Baltimore was pretty much dominating the game, staying ahead by 1 or 2 scores most of the game. And then halfway through the third quarter, Buffalo manages to get within 8 points, scores a touchdown, and normally you'd kick the extra point and get within 7. But they decided to go for 2 halfway through the third quarter. It's called chasing the points, and they missed the 2-point conversion, which left them down 27-19. Halfway through the third quarter, they're down by 8. But then there's another touchdown for the Ravens through the third quarter, and they end up going up by 15 points, 34-19. Then in the fourth quarter, Buffalo gets another touchdown, and again, since they're down by 8 now, they have to go for 2 to try to get it close. So they do again, miss the conversion. This leaves them down by 9 points, 34-25. Baltimore comes back, gets themselves another touchdown. And in this case, they end up missing the kicked extra point. This proves to be their undoing. They end up going up 40-25. So now they're up by 15 points. So again, when Buffalo scores again, being down by 15, they feel the need this time to just get the 7 points. They get their extra point. They're down by 8. When they get the next touchdown, being down by 8, they need to go for the 2-pointer to tie it. And they miss that 2-pointer. So they end up missing 3 2-point conversions. That means had they gone for the regular kicked extra point, they could have had those 3 points. And at that point, they'd have been up 41-40. But by missing this 2-pointer, they're down 40-38. Luckily for them, Derrick Henry fumbled the ball, and they were able to get the ball back, bring it into field goal range, and kick the game-winning field goal. So the coach got bailed out of chasing the points. other sports news, they had the finals of the U.S. Open for men's and women's tennis, and the orange dictator decided he wanted to go to the finals and show up there. And by doing so, first of all, he caused such a massive traffic problem and a backlog of people trying to get into the event that a lot of the people who had tickets to see the event didn't get to see it. Halfway through the event, the place was only about half full. But even so, they gave Donald Trump the welcome he so richly deserved. But it's not just that Donald Trump gets booed there during the national anthem when he shows up on screen at Arthur Ashe Stadium, but the fact that the U.S. Tennis Association went and told all the broadcasters and streamers there that were putting on the event to not show any protests against the president, to not show or record him being booed, which of course everybody went and did with their cell phones, and everybody went and posted online, and most of the media outlets have fairly reported that Donald Trump was mostly booed at the U.S. Open. You've heard that old saying about politics makes strange bedfellows, and boy, lately it has been the case, where I find myself in agreement with people like Rand Paul when it comes to the creeping authoritarianism here, and Thomas Massie and Marjorie Taylor Greene when it comes to releasing the Epstein list, or people like Bill Kristol when it comes to abolishing ICE. It's just a weird time to be alive, and this week we got another example where I never thought I'd see the day when this happens, but the Trump administration, Pam Bondi and the Department of Injustice there floated the idea of banning guns for transgender people. This being in the wake of the latest mass shooting, the one that was committed by a transgender shooter, one of 4 out of some 4,000 transgender shooters out there that turned out to be transgender. They want to say being transgender is some sort of mental illness and some sort of reason a person shouldn't have a gun. And lo and behold, what came across my feed but a post from the NRA, the National Rifle Association, in response to the government threatening to ban guns for trans people. It wrote, quote, "The NRA supports Second Amendment rights of all law-abiding Americans to purchase, possess, and use firearms. NRA does not and will not support any policy proposals that implement sweeping gun bans that arbitrarily strip law-abiding citizens of their Second Amendment rights without due process." Well, what do you know? I find myself in agreement with the NRA on this one. Now, if only I could get the NRA around to my point of view of supporting the gun rights of law-abiding medical marijuana patients. Our main story this week, as it has been for many weeks, is the continuing attempt to cover up and distract from Donald Trump's complicity in child rape. And the Epstein victims, they held their press conference this week. He tried to drown them out with a military flyover, just showing you how petty the man can be. But trying to protect the legacy of his best friend of 15 years, Jeffrey Epstein, gave the sweetheart deal to Ghislaine Maxwell, floating a pardon for her, and in the meantime, trying to distract us all from the import and the weight of what's going on in that situation, this time by declaring war on the city of Chicago. You may have seen the meme that he posted out, the AI-generated slop of himself in the pose from the movie Apocalypse Now, that Vietnam War movie about sanity and warfare that explains how wonderful war is and how great it always works out for everyone. Yeah. And so he's saying that Chicago is going to learn. I love the smell of deportations in the morning, and Chicago's going to learn why we call it the Department of War, with a scene of helicopters flying over the skyline of Chicago in flames and fire as if it had just been napalmed. The President of the United States declaring war on a blue American city in a blue American state. And are we supposed to take him seriously? Supposed to take him literally here? I think so. This is not normal, and this is not something that we should be accepting. And it's just amazing to me how clearly and plainly they will state their goals, how they will state their vision for America, state exactly what they want to do, how they see the blue cities as lawless, crime-ridden hellscapes. Surprisingly, though, Chicago's got a pretty large police department. New York has a pretty large police department, but yeah, apparently that's not enough. I guess, when they're saying they need to send the National Guard into all these cities to take care of the crime, are you saying all the police that we have don't keep crime down? Like, all this money we've been pumping into police departments to make them bigger than some countries' militaries, all the MRAPs and other military hardware we give them, all of that hasn't been enough to keep crime down? Maybe we're going about reducing crime the wrong way. Maybe there's some other ways we should be tackling the root causes of crime, like poverty, like inequality, the desperation that makes people want to commit crimes. But no, we're going to send in the National Guard. We're going to federalize troops from red states and send them into blue states, which makes me wonder, can the blue states activate their own National Guards to protect their own citizens from the red state National Guards that are coming in, to protect their citizens from the ICE agents and hired thugs and goons who are probably Proud Boys and 3%ers and Oath Keepers and pardoned January 6ers and KKKers and local militia guys and who knows who else they're trying to round up now that they don't have any sort of considerations for, having a degree or not having a criminal record. Coming into our cities, coming into our states, trying to intimidating us with fear, and the end goal, of course, being to disrupt the 2026 midterms. To put these troops in the streets, to put these ICE agents at polling stations, to make black and brown voters think, well, maybe I'll just stay home this time around. The efforts to try to shut down vote by mail, to ensure that the only way you can vote is to go to one of these polling stations that are being patrolled by ICE, who's going to ask to see your papers, who may question your brown skin as to whether or not you're an actual citizen in this country. And then, of course, after they round up all of the brown-skinned people and they fail to be able to vote in the cities that tend to vote Democratic, and when the Democratic vote totals go down, they'll point to that and say, see, we told you the illegals were voting Democratic. We told you the Democrats were bringing in illegals to vote for them. Self-fulfilling prophecy. But they can continue to ramp up this macho idea of what our defense is supposed to be. The Department of Defense, which was named as such in 1948, renamed from the War Department. We changed that name because the idea of having a Department of War means you need to be utilizing that department. You need to be going to war. You need to be on the offensive. And we as Americans, after World War II, decided that we would be the protectors of this world, the defenders of this world. We wouldn't be aggressors. We would stomp out aggression throughout the world. We came with a new order that valued laws and following the rules and cooperative behavior. Well, that's not good for Trump. That's not good for Trump world, not good for the aspiring autocratic dictator. So he's got his alcoholic former weekend Fox News host, the Secretary of Defense, Pete Hegseth, who's now going to be referred to as the Secretary of War because Trump signed an executive order. Now, understand he does not have the authority to unilaterally rename any department that was created by an act of Congress. Only Congress can rename it. So he has indicated in his executive order that Department of War is its secondary name. It's also known as its DBA, if you will. Department of Defense doing business as Department of War. And to trumpet this change, there was a photo op with Pete Hegseth in the Oval Office as Trump is sitting at the Resolute desk, and Hegseth goes off about this macho incarnation of this new vision of the Department of War and its war fighters.
At your direction, Mr. President, the War Department is going to fight decisively, not endless conflicts. It's going to fight to win, not to lose. We're going to go on offense, not just on defense. Maximum lethality, not tepid legality. Violent effect, not politically correct.
Bones being broke, not being woke. Killing the mans, not accepting trans. Hounds of Hades, not combat ladies. Make hooties go splat, planned on open chat. Being shitty and patrolling cities. Picking up trash and going fash. Ooh, the new Department of War. And I guess we can add to that, blowing up boats to try to get votes. You saw this happen as well off the coast of Venezuela, where the United States Navy just blew up what was supposedly a suspected drug trafficker boat. Just openly blown up, murdered 11 people on that boat. No trial, no arrest, just the President of the United States, through his military, deciding these 11 people needed to die. That's where we're at now. The President of the United States can just decide these people need to die, who are not enemy combatants, who are not engaged in warfare, who are not a part of any country that we're currently at war with. But just because they're supposedly scary drug dealers, we can just blow them up. Well, what's to stop the president from deciding that you or me or whatever boat you might be on isn't a scary drug dealer that needs to be blown up? There's some reports that this may not have even been a drug smuggling boat. It may have been human smugglers, that is, human trafficking, trying to get people, immigrants, might have just blown up people trying to seek a better life. And it's well known the Coast Guard has plenty of ability, and the Navy has plenty of ability to intercept these boats, to be able to take these people in, to arrest them, to give them due process, fair trial. But no, that's not something that the Republicans are into these days. And it brings me to one of these moments, like I mentioned earlier, where politics makes strange bedfellows, where I have to find myself in agreement with people like Rand Paul. As the news of this boat being blown up spread across social media, the Vice President of the United States, J.D. Vance, posted on Twitter, quote, "Killing cartel members who poison our fellow citizens is the highest and best use of our military." Really? Not, defending against foreign armies, which is the whole point of having it? No. Those who poison our fellow citizens, highest and best use in the military. Now, Brian Krasenstein responded, he's an online activist, responded to this, saying, killing the citizens of another nation who are civilians without any due process is called a war crime. And J.D. Vance responded to that, "I don't give a shit what you call it." The Vice President of the United States does not deny that it's a war crime to deny due process to 11 Venezuelans who were openly murdered in international waters. I don't give a shit what you call it. That led Rand Paul, the Republican from Kentucky, to say, quote, "J.D. I don't give a shit Vance says killing people he accuses of a crime is the highest and best use of the military. Did he ever read To Kill a Mockingbird? Did he ever wonder what might happen if the accused were immediately executed without trial or representation? What a despicable and thoughtless sentiment it is to glorify killing someone without a trial." Kudos to Rand Paul for that one, because he's absolutely correct. And in response to that, I don't know if it was the J.D. Vance account or if it was some Republican, just like the Republican National account, one of these official accounts, responded with the meme from SpongeBob SquarePants of one of the characters crying over the death of the other, labeling the crying character Rand Paul and the dead character criminal drug dealers. Like he's weeping over criminal drug dealers. Again, we don't know they were. They didn't have a trial. They weren't arrested. They weren't given any due process. We don't know if they were criminal drug dealers. And I also saw someone online trying to defend J.D. Vance on this. Well, you know, you have to give J.D. Vance a little credit here because he grew up, you know, with his grandmother being a drug addict and his mom being an addict, and he, you know, addiction is a very important issue to him. There wasn't a single South American or Central American or Mexican drug cartel member who had one iota of incidents with what happened with J.D. Vance in his life. J.D. Vance's grandma was stealing pills from her patients, stealing narcotic opioids made by cartels like the Sackler family. The Sackler family who got away with all of that because, you know, they're white billionaires. They're not Venezuelans on a boat. So don't give me this J.D. Vance grew up around drug addiction, so it's a special interest to him. Because if he really cared, he wouldn't be blowing up Venezuelan drug boats. He'd be prosecuting and incarcerating the Sackler family. But I don't want to get too far afield from the original point here, this invasion of Chicago, following this invasion of Washington, D.C., following this invasion of Los Angeles by federalized National Guard troops. And I know the scenes lately have been of them picking up trash or mulching around the Capitol, doing checkpoint stops and bugging drunks on the square. And it's been kind of disregarded as being partially silly or ineffective or unnecessary. But not enough people are seeing this as the danger that it is. And to understand that danger, we only need to take a look back 1 week ago. It was Labor Day. And you talk about all these National Guard being stationed in our blue cities. You need to understand a little bit about our labor history and how the National Guard fits into that history. In 1877, railroad workers went on strike in West Virginia. They got other states' railroad workers to join them and started shutting down rail lines and sparking general strikes. So the rail companies called in the local, state, and federal government, which sent in private militias, cops, and National Guard troops to open fire on them. To open fire on the striking workers in 1877. Happened again in 1886. Mill workers in Milwaukee went on strike for an 8-hour workday. Almost every mill and factory closed down. The governor called in the National Guard. They shot and killed 15 workers. 1891 in Pittsburgh, mine workers went on strike. They sent the National Guard in. They killed 7 workers, and then the mine owner hired 100 goons to regularly attack the workers until they went back to work. In 1894, 250,000 rail workers across 27 states led President Grover Cleveland, the only other president to be elected to non-consecutive terms other than Trump. President Cleveland sent in thousands of U.S. Marshals and 12,000 Army troops to break the strikes, killing a dozen workers in Chicago and 30 in other states. 1897, immigrant workers at the Ladder Mine in Pennsylvania went on strike. Sheriff's posse went to disperse the few hundred workers, shot 19 of them dead, all completely unarmed, all completely peaceful. 1905, Teamsters in Chicago went on strike. Hired goons attacked the picket lines. 21 workers were killed. 1912, mine workers at Paint Creek and Cabin Creek went on strike. The company hired goons to beat them, poison their food, and shoot at their homes. 50 workers died. 1913, Ludlow Mines in Colorado. Company hired goons, and later the National Guard joined them to machine gun the camp that the strikers were living in. When their leader was called out to discuss a ceasefire, they executed him on the spot. 200 workers were killed. 1920, the Battle of Blair Mountain, 13,000 striking miners, and a sheriff who had air support to drop old World War I bombs and gas on the workers. Up to 100 workers were killed before President Harding called in the army. And in 1937, the Memorial Day Massacre happened in Chicago when striking steelworkers and their families were met by 250 Chicago cops who were hired by the company, who then began firing into the crowd. 10 people were shot, mostly in the back. That's 1937. There are still people alive who were alive at that time. This is in our recent history, folks. The labor movement shows us what happens when the status quo gets disrupted enough and the National Guard is brought in to return everything back to normal. Don't think that the National Guard won't shoot American citizens. All these efforts to distract from the Epstein list, however, are not distracting anyone from the Epstein list. As we mentioned, the survivors, the Epstein victims, gathered near the Capitol because they can't hold the hearings inside. The Republicans won't let them. But anyway, Thomas Massie and Ro Khanna, a Republican and a Democrat, are putting together this press conference. They put this press conference together. The survivors spoke out. It was amazing. I listened to it live, and it was chilling, the testimony of these brave women. Massie and Khanna have a discharge petition that they've put together, which would force the Department of Justice to have to release the Epstein files. And of course, all the Democrats are signed on to this. And he's managed to get 4 Republicans: Thomas Massie himself, Nancy Mace, Marjorie Taylor Greene, and I think there's one other, I'm not recalling off the top of my head. But basically, they're in a situation now where they need 2 more people, 2 more Republicans to side with the victims rather than to protect the pedophiles. The Trump administration has got a full court press on this, saying that anyone that would help Thomas Massie here would be angering the government, would be committing a heinous sin in trying to get in the way of the Justice Department and their full transparency, which, again, this week they released the same 30,000 pages of stuff that they'd released before, once again trying to fool their base into thinking that they're really doing something about going after the pedophiles here. But the big news that came out about this press conference was the Epstein survivors pointing out that they don't need a list. They don't need to wait for anybody to release any list. They were victimized by these men. They know who they are. Now, as some of the media started asking, well, why don't you give us a name? Why don't you tell us a name? One of the women pointed out, hey, look, I go and name politician X or billionaire Y as somebody that abused me, and they'll sue me into homelessness. And that's where they start talking about putting together their own list. All of the survivors getting together and putting together their own list. And to avoid being sued into oblivion, Marjorie Taylor Greene, that's the other one, Marjorie Taylor Greene has agreed that she would, and Thomas Massie has agreed, that they would read the names of the survivors on the House floor, where the members are protected by the speech and debate clause from being sued. No one can sue a congressman or a senator for what they say in the official proceedings of Congress. Now, as I thought about this, I started thinking, how would you do this? Because if you tried to do this and read the names out, there'd be accusations that it's politically motivated. You're trying to target certain people. And there's also still, even though they're protected under speech and debate clause and the lawsuits couldn't fly, it would still be possible for one of these perpetrators, one of these pedophiles, to know that if his name was named and he'd only been with one of the girls one time, he'd know exactly who it was that snitched. And while maybe he couldn't sue, there might be other nefarious ways of trying to affect the person that tattled on him. So in thinking about that, I've come up with a way that I'd like to suggest, humbly and respectfully, that the Epstein victims put together this list and that Massey and Green and others read it on the House floor. It's to do this. Get all of the victims together and have them name each one of their perpetrators. Collect the list from each woman. Tally up the names on each woman's list, keeping track of how many women they had abused. Then order that list in reverse order from the most women abused to the least women abused. Perpetrator A abused 24 girls, perpetrator B abused 20 girls, perpetrator C abused 18 girls, and so on. And then make the announcement that you're going to start naming one name per day, starting with the name of the man who abused the most girls. And the next day, the name of the man who abused the second most girls, and the next day, the man who abused the third most girls, and so forth. Number one, this gets you out of any accusations of it being politically motivated. There's a randomness to it, right? Hey, we're not naming, I don't know, Bill Clinton because he's a Democrat. We're not naming, I don't know, Donald Trump because he's a Republican. We're naming this person because they're the ones who did the most offending. They were the biggest pedophile. Now, once that guy who raped 24 girls, his name is public, he is the sole focus of the news media cycle for the entire next 24 hours. The white hot spotlight is on him. And that perpetrator B who had 20 girls, he hears that this guy had 24, and the next person to be announced is the next highest on the list. Well, I know I had 20, but did someone else have 21? Did someone else have 22 or 23? Am I the next guy who's going to be announced? Next day comes, perpetrator B with 20 girls, his name's announced. Now the white hot spotlight is on him. And perpetrator C, who raped 18 girls, am I on deck? Soon enough, you will have this undercurrent of all these other perpetrators who perpetrated fewer of the crimes, starting to wonder when the spotlight's going to hit them next. And do they want to have the full weight of the 24-hour news cycle and the full spotlight on them? Or would it be better to pressure Congress into releasing that entire list so that in the media report, they're just one of many of the perpetrators? That the white hot spotlight is on a group and the blame is diffused somewhat. But personally, I just like the idea of all these child rapists feeling nervous day after day after day. Let's do it. Take the politics out of it. Name the top perp day by day. Let the bottom perps fight it all out to get maximum transparency for the Epstein victims. Taking a look at politics on the national level, want to talk a little bit about our cabinet secretaries and how they are actively working to destroy everything that is good about the United States of America. We start with Robert Fuckwit Kennedy, the Secretary of Health and Human Services, the anti-vax quack with the worm in his brain, who sawed the head off of a whale, who picked up dead bear carcasses, this weirdo. he was up on Capitol Hill being grilled by the senators, many of whom confirmed him, about the anti-vax platform that he has taken upon the Department of Health and Human Services, talking about ending vaccine mandates, about banning the COVID-19 vaccine for all but the sickest folks, just doing everything he can to make sure more people get infected and more people die in the United States. And don't worry, I'm not going to play any RFK Jr. quotes. I can't stand the man's voice. It constantly sounds like he's holding in a hit. But you maybe have seen the clips being grilled, not knowing how many people have died from COVID. Now, I don't think anyone knows. You're the Secretary of Health and Human Services. You're supposed to know how many people died of COVID. But the thing that really struck me about this hearing was how, I believe it was Senator Ron Wyden, my senator from Oregon, who asked that Robert Kennedy be sworn in before his testimony to Congress. Do you swear to tell the truth? And the Republicans blocked that. So Robert F. Kennedy was implicitly given a platform to lie. There was absolutely no possible consequence for Robert Kennedy lying in front of Congress again, because he clearly lied during his confirmation hearings. And I'd like to call out in particular, I mean, we gave Rand Paul a little credit. Let's take that credit away, because Rand Paul from Kentucky, Cassidy from Louisiana, Marshall from Kansas, and Barrasso from Wyoming, 4 Republican senators who all voted to confirm Robert Kennedy as Secretary of Health and Human Services, are all medical doctors. They all have a medical license. And part of being a medical doctor is that Hippocratic oath, first do no harm. And they should have clearly known that Robert Kennedy intended to do harm to the American people, to our children, by taking away these mandates for vaccines, for ending vaccination for COVID-19. And it was funny listening to go around to COVID-19, right? On the one hand, COVID vaccine is terrible and killed all these people. It was awful. It was terrible COVID vaccine. And then on the other hand, oh, President Trump, he certainly deserves a Nobel Peace Prize for coming up with Operation Warp Speed and the COVID vaccine that saved all those lives. That's one of the fun things about modern conservatism. It doesn't require any consistency whatsoever. It's just whatever's good for you at the time, just say it. We see this spreading across all of the other agencies in the federal government as well. Most recently, the Secretary of the Department of Energy, I forget his name off the top of my head, but Department of Energy has been trying to gaslight the American people about wind and solar, because this guy is an oil and gas guy, of course. Trying to put out this false notion that wind and solar aren't reliable because the sun goes down and the wind doesn't always blow. And they posted this on X, on Twitter, and the readers put in a community note that explained, batteries exist. There is this technology called batteries. It's been around for, thousands of years, actually, being able to store power from an energy source for later use. And I'd like to think this is a bridge too stupid even for Americans to believe that wind and solar don't work when the wind's not blowing and the sun don't shine. But given the fact that we've elected Donald Trump twice, I wouldn't put anything past the stupidity of the American people. We've also got the Department of Labor. They've already posted the dictator's visage on their building in a 3-story high flag, reminiscent of Mussolini and Hitler and Mao and Stalin, all the great dictators of all time. Always have those big glowering images on buildings. But they've also taken to posting Nazi propaganda. All this build the homeland, defend the homeland, with these Norman Rockwell-looking pictures of handsome, square-jawed white boys. And they do. They look just like the old Nazi propaganda posters back from the 40s. And if that's not enough, we got Sean Duffy, Secretary of Transportation, the former Real World Road Rules reality show guy. Yeah, that guy. Sean Duffy, Transportation Department, who was talking to NASA, talking about our space program and how we need to update our attitudes and not let safety be the enemy of progress. Don't let safety be the enemy of progress. That's the problem. We've just been too safe. We've just been, too considerate about those guys that we put strapped on top of a big rocket bomb. We're worrying a little too much about whether they, don't blow up. That's how little this administration thinks of science, of scientists, of astronauts, of healthcare, of energy. It is so weird to be living simultaneously in the information age, the age of computers, the age of telecommunication, the age of the James Webb Space Telescope looking 14 billion years into the past to understanding the cosmic nature of the observable universe, all the way down to the infinitesimal nature of quantum physics and mechanics, and at the same time be the country that's getting rid of vaccines. At the same time that doesn't understand how batteries work. Time to turn to my left and see what's happening with the Democrats in the United States. And this week I was on social media and I made the point of noting a quote from Marco Rubio, our current Secretary of State, who is in reference to that boat being blown up that we mentioned earlier in the program, just the extrajudicial killing of 11 Venezuelans in international waters. And Rubio was defending it, saying something to the effect of, yeah, we'll do it again. We'll do it again. We'll openly commit murder on the high seas. We're the United States. We'll do it again. And in that post, I pointed out how Marco Rubio, I reminded everyone, as I usually do, that Marco Rubio was unanimously confirmed by the United States Senate. That every single Democrat voted for Marco Rubio to be the Secretary of State. Now, this got me some attention online, and I got into a conversation back and forth with someone on Blue Sky who pointed out, well, President, he won the election. Donald Trump won the election, and he has the right to set his cabinet any way he likes. He has great power in setting his agenda, and you can't deny that Marco Rubio you may disagree with his points of view, but you can't deny that he's qualified for the position. He's absolutely qualified for the position. And the Senate's capability is that of advice and consent. They don't set the agenda. Basically kind of slapping me down, tutting the idea that the Democrats should have opposed Marco Rubio's nomination. Of course, I took that farther. You know me. And I said, not only should they have opposed Marco Rubio's nomination, they should have opposed every nomination of every judge, every cabinet official, every low-level official, every public service official, anybody that the fascist dictator nominates to run his fascism should be opposed by the Democrats. These are not normal times. This is not a normal government. He is not obeying his oath of office to take care that the laws be faithfully executed. He is an insurrectionist who committed treason against the United States. He was impeached for it once. He was impeached for it twice. He was then indicted in 4 different districts for 91 different felonies, of which he was convicted of 34. Why in the world would you work with this person? Why would you give them any grace, any benefit of the doubt, any support for any nominee or any part of their agenda? And then it came back to, well, you're just unreasonable, and if they would ground things to the halt, what would happen when the next Democrat became president and the Republicans would grind things to a halt? Yeah, like Mitch McConnell did. Like Mitch McConnell when Barack Obama was winning his first term, saying our goal, our number one goal, is to ensure that Barack Obama is a one-term president and openly defied him, even to the point of denying him a Supreme Court pick. And you want to play fair with these guys? You think their nominees deserve a fair hearing? You think they're not going to come in and just lie to you about what they're going to do? Like RFK lied about what he was going to do with vaccines? Like Amy Coney Barrett and Justice Kavanaugh and Gorsuch all lied about Roe v. Wade being settled law? It's time to be a real opposition party. So, you know me, I look shit up. I actually wanted to see how much support the Democrats have given Trump's nominees. And there's a great page for this out at Ballotpedia. You can find it. I'll have the link in my show notes. But Democrats gave at least one vote to every one of Trump's nominees but 6. There are only 6 people in Trump's cabinet that didn't get Democratic support. That would be Tulsi Gabbard for Director of National Intelligence, Pete Hegseth for Secretary of Defense, Robert Fuckwitt Kennedy for Health and Human Services, Linda McMahon for Education, Howard Lutnick for, Commerce, I think, and Russell Vought for Office of Management and Budget. 6 of the entire cabinet and all the appointed officials. The only ones that Democrats stonewalled were those 6. There was at least one vote for every other nominee. And then, on the other side of the spectrum, there were 5 Democratic senators who gave yes votes to 10 of Trump's nominees. 5 senators who actively helped 10 of Trump's nominees. That would be John Fetterman of Pennsylvania, John Hickenlooper of Colorado, Maggie Hassan of New Hampshire, Ruben Gallego of Arizona, and Jeanne Shaheen of New Hampshire. Democrats helping these guys get their jobs, in which, as I mentioned in the last segment, they are now gaslighting us on wind and solar and Nazi agitprop and safety and vaccines. You Democratic senators who approved of any of these nominees should be ashamed of yourself, and I hope you've learned your lesson. I hope you've learned now that it's time to shut it down. Shut all of this down. And that gets us over to the House side of things, because we're still operating on continuing resolutions to fund the government, and we're going to have another one of these government shutdown fights that come up. So with the government shutdown fights coming up, Chuck Schumer and Hakeem Jeffries have already sent their letter to the Republicans on the other side about how we could work together to fund the government. And we know when this happened last time, there were some Democrats who were ready to fight, some Democrats who were ready to say, hey, we got to have these certain concessions or we're just going to let the government shut down. You know, like the Republicans do almost every time when they're not in power. They hold Democrats' feet to the fire and get some concessions before they agree not to shut the government down. This last time around, we didn't get any concessions, and then Chuck Schumer just folded like a cheap card table. So this time around, are we going to be able to get Jeffries and Schumer to stick up for something, to threaten the shutdown of the government in order that we might get them to, I don't know, take ICE and National Guard out of blue cities? How about that, just as a baseline? We won't fund your government so long as your government is attacking us. I think that should just be a baseline right there. But no, we get this from Jeffries.
Donald Trump promised that he would lower housing costs on day one. Here's a suggestion for the Trump administration. Try to legislate. And maybe we can find common ground in order to get something done on behalf of the American people.
Common ground. Doing something that benefits the American people. Yeah, that's exactly what's in Donald Trump's mind. He just wants to help the American people, wants to find common ground with Democrats. You know how often you hear Republicans talking about searching for bipartisan solutions, how Republicans are always talking about how we need to reach across the aisle, how the New York Times always has those cutting, incisive articles where they go to some diner in Detroit or Los Angeles or Phoenix, and they talk to black and brown people about what Republicans need to do to win their vote. Yeah, that's what we need. Chuck Schumer and Hakeem Jeffries are so ill-equipped to meet this moment that I truly believe Democrats out there running for 2026 could do worse than to run against the Democratic leadership. To make a commitment as a congressperson, you elect me to Congress, I won't vote for Hakeem Jeffries to be speaker. Let's just get it out right now. Because I know Democrats, our approval rating is what, 25, 20%, 16%? Where is it at now? I haven't kept track of how low it's gotten to. And it's that same status quo defending the establishment, the way things have always been. These guys think, the Schumer and Jeffries think, well, we'll just get around to 2026, the midterms, win the House back. The Donald Trump will be out in 2028. Everything will be fine. We go back to the days of Tip O'Neill and Ronald Reagan sharing a beer at the pub after a long day in Congress. Those days aren't coming back. This is a different world we live in. We are America under a cold civil war. We are still dealing with the ideological fallout of not rooting out and exterminating the royalists, the Confederates, the Klan, the Nazi sympathizers, the segregationists. This same evil that's been festering in our country for well over 250 years. We've always failed to deal with it because we just couldn't bring ourselves to punish fellow white people. Yeah, I know they did terrible things, but gosh, we need to get over it. We need to move on. We need to look forward and work to the future. Don't dwell in the past. No more. It is absolutely time to hold these people to account. All I want to hear from Democratic candidates is lock them up. But all is not lost. It's not all gloom, despair, and agony on me, because out there in New York City, Zohran Mamdani, the Democratic Socialist who is the Democratic Party's nominee for mayor of New York City, continues to crush it in his campaign. And so terrified of Zohran Mamdani winning in New York City, and more importantly, succeeding in New York City and giving lie to all the tropes about socialism and how it can't work. So terrified are they in the Trump administration, they're actually actively courting the other candidates in the race to try to get them to drop out, to make this a race that'll be just Andrew Cuomo, the disgraced former governor slash sex pest slash corrupt politician slash guy who let people die in nursing homes and covered up COVID deaths. That Andrew Cuomo, the one who already lost the Democratic primary badly to Zohran Mamdani. They want to make this a two-person race. Trump's people think if it's just Mamdani versus Adams, the Republicans, plus the people who don't like Mamdani for whatever anti-Semitic, anti-Islamic reasons, whatever. He thinks that might be a better race than to have the current race, which is Governor Cuomo, as well as the current mayor, Adams, who's running fourth in the polls, this disgraced guy as well. And then the Republican candidate, who's kind of seen as a silly fringe candidate, Curtis Sliwa, from the Guardian Angels. He always wears that red beret. And they just think having those three candidates in will split the anti-Zohran vote, and then he'll run away with it. I think he'll run away with it anyway. So to try to narrow the field, they offered Eric Adams, the black mayor of New York City, they offered him a post in the Trump administration, and I'll give you three guesses which cabinet department they offered to a black man. Oh, did you guess Housing and Urban Development? Yes, you win the Ben Carson Award for that one. Yeah, they offered a spot in HUD if he would drop out of the race. He says he's not going to drop out of the race. Don't know what they might try to offer to Curtis Sliwa. Position in ICE, maybe? I don't know. And what's funny, someone else on Blue Sky noted this, is the funny situation about all three of these guys running against Mamdani is each one of them has a valid case as to say, why should I drop out? Why shouldn't the other two guys drop out? So it's kind of a mutually assured situation where they're all going to stay in the race because each of them sees that the other two ought to drop out. If you're Cuomo, you're thinking, hey, I finished second. I got the best chance to beat the guy. You other two guys should drop out. If you're Adams, you're thinking, hey, I'm the incumbent mayor here. You guys aren't running for re-election. I am. You guys should drop out. And Curtis Sliwa, he's got to say, hey, I'm the Republican nominee. He's the Democratic nominee. We're the two that should be running against each other. So it puts Zoran Mamdani in this perfect position. And he continues to shine on television when they get him on these different talking head shows. They were discussing this notion that Trump has about debating Zoran Mamdani rather than him debating against Cuomo and Adams. And here's what Mamdani had to say.
Let's cut out the middleman. Why should I debate Donald Trump's puppet when I could debate Donald Trump himself? If Donald Trump is serious about this, he should come to New York City. We can have as many debates as he wants about why he is cutting SNAP benefits for hungry New Yorkers just to fund tax cuts for his billionaire donors.
What's even better about that clip is when Mamdani posted that on social media, he added the caption, quote, I already beat another guy who cut Medicaid, gave tax breaks to billionaires, and hounded multiple women who accused him of sexual harassment. Might as well debate the one who's actually calling the shots. End quote. That's a great zinger there from Zoran Mamdani, who on this Abby Phillips show on CNN, she was bringing up the fact that Elon Musk may soon become a trillionaire, and tried to lure him into the whole class warfare trope, and he gave the perfect answer.
Your democratic socialism has been just the center of everything that people talk about. But in this country, there's a big debate about the wealthy, the uber wealthy, the gap between the rich and the poor. Just this week, Tesla offered a pay package to Elon Musk that would potentially make him a trillionaire. Do you think trillionaires should exist?
I think the better question is whether working people should exist, because what we're seeing right now is amidst this incredible wealth, we have people who are keeping the city running that have to now live outside of the city, outside of the state. There are New Yorkers who are living in New Jersey and Pennsylvania and Connecticut because they just can't afford to live here. Amidst all of that, we have talk of trillionaires. I mean, it tells you where our political priorities are. And that's what is so frustrating, is that when we talk about the cuts to SNAP benefits here in New York City, the throwing of millions off of their health insurance, it's not just a incident that has taken place in Washington, D.C. It is a function of the largest wealth transfer we've ever seen in our history of our country's politics.
Oh, that is so good, because they always try to get a democratic socialist into this position of, oh, you hate capitalism, you hate the rich, you hate people getting ahead, you hate people making a business and building wealth. And that's always to try to divide and conquer, try to split people up, try to make so the working class voter is pit against the small business owner, is pit against the construction manager. These guys that might have, you know, a nice truck and a house in the hills, but they're not wealthy, right? Always try to get that middle class, upper middle class people on the side of the ultra wealthy people they'll never be, rather than defending the poor people they could easily become with 1, 2, or 3 bad months, as many of us learned during COVID. So it's a perfect answer on this, because from my point of view, as a poor person, as someone in poverty, working class person, there is no difference to me between a millionaire, a billionaire, and a trillionaire. All of those people to me are people who wake up in the morning knowing that no matter what happens that day, they'll have a home tomorrow. They'll have a job tomorrow. They'll be able to eat tomorrow. People who have no fear whatsoever of having to live in a tent on a sidewalk. People have no fear whatsoever of having to go without a pill, go without a shot, go without a surgery, go without teeth, because you just can't afford it. So I really don't care if Elon Musk becomes a trillionaire, because he's already a centibillionaire. Before that, he was a decibillionaire. Before that, he was a billionaire. Before that, he was a centimillionaire. He's always had this money. He will always have that money. I don't care how much money he has. I care how much money we have. Now, if we can come up with a solution where everyone can have health care and housing and food and basic security, if we can get all people's needs met, lift people out of poverty, I don't care if there's quadrillionaires. If those two things can exist at the same time, great. Go on and make all those zeros and commas you want. But if there's a choice, if it's between trillionaires existing and feeding and housing people, I think you might be able to make do with just $500 billion. All right, time to look to my right and see what's going on with the Republicans. And of course, they're all scurrying around trying to protect Trump from his complicity in the Epstein files. And this latest statement from Mike Johnson really turned some heads. And even MAGA can't believe the BS that he spewed. When asked about Donald Trump and the Epstein files, Mike Johnson repeated one of the QAnon conspiracy theories that Donald Trump was secretly an FBI informant trying to take down Jeffrey Epstein from the inside. Okay, FBI informant Trump. The FBI informant working on a Democrat hoax. The FBI informant working on the case that Obama and Clinton and Biden made stuff up in. Working undercover for 15 years. And understand that people that become informants usually do so because they were caught committing the crime and then become the informant to turn over evidence to save their own ass. So was he an informant because he got caught raping all those kids and then turned state's evidence? Yeah, this talking point was so stupid that Mike Johnson has already begun walking it back, which the press has reported on as walking back, and not the fact that he lied. He just lied about Trump being an informant to try to cover Trump's ass. But it's not the stupidest thing that the Republicans have been up to. We mentioned earlier in the program about Robert Fuckwit Kennedy at the national level calling for the end of vaccine mandates, and boy, has someone taken him up on it. The state of Florida has declared that they're going to be ending all vaccine mandates for schools. You can send your kid to school with measles and mumps and rubella, pertussis, diphtheria, whooping cough, COVID, human papillomavirus, whatever. You don't have to get your kids vaccinated in the state of Florida. And this has been heralded by the Florida Surgeon General. The guy's name is Ladapo. And the quote from him as to why they are ending vaccine mandates will just, it just pisses me off is what it does. He's speaking to Jake Tapper on CNN, who's pointing out that Florida Department of Health didn't do any sort of studies or projections about what would happen by ending these vaccine mandates, how many more kids would be infected, how many more kids would die. They didn't even bother to study, didn't even bother to look, because according to Ladapo, this is an issue of ethics and morals, not health.
It's really about ethics. I mean, is it appropriate for a government to, or any other entity, to dictate to you what you should put in your body? No, it's absolutely not appropriate. You have sovereignty over your body.
Nobody should dictate what you put into your body. Did you really say that with a straight face in the state of Florida, where the possession of 21 grams of cannabis is a felony? Where people can be busted for various different substances that they might want to put in their body? And are you really with a straight face telling us that people in Florida have bodily sovereignty A state that bans all abortions? Give me a break with your bodily sovereignty. It's funny how it's my body, my choice when it comes to allowing your kids to get the rest of our kids infected with measles. But it's not my body, my choice when a single mother wants to end her pregnancy from a rape or from incest or from the fact that she can't economically support the child or from the fact that bearing that child may harm her health or the fact that she just doesn't want to be a mom. Bodily sovereignty. And this stupidity, I mean, the thing is, this is not just going to affect Florida. What happens when the family moves from Florida to Oregon? And now that kid's got to come to class. We've got vaccine mandates. We're going to get that kid vaccinated. But that kid's going to, in the meantime, travel to the state of Oregon, be in the airport among other kids, possibly go to a playground with other kids. Are we going to get to the point where states are going to have to set up checkpoints and borders, have our own customs to be able to control the inflow of our fellow Americans from other states because we can't trust that they won't put our public health at risk just because of the state they come from? Already in the wake of this news, the states of Washington, Oregon, California, and Hawaii have all banded together to form a West Coast Health Consortium to be able to work together on storing and administering vaccines and to continue the study into infectious disease and public health. We are in, I keep saying we're in a cold civil war, and we're starting to see soft secession. The soft secession of the West Coast states taking over the parts of the federal government activities that are no longer going to be provided to our citizenry. And you can see this probably starting up in the upper Midwest, maybe Minnesota and Illinois getting together. Already happening up in the New England states, all of the New England states except New Hampshire, because New Hampshire's weird. But all the rest of them banding together to try to protect each other's health. We're slowly balkanizing the United States of America. We're going to have these blue states consortiums where your health is protected, where you can still get education, where you actually do have bodily sovereignty to get abortions and smoke weed. And then we're going to have the red states, these little laboratories of fascism where they'll reinstate Jim Crow. And they'll shove all the gay and trans people back in the closet. We're going to end up with 4 or 5 different countries within the United States of America. That's how crazy this has become, because we just have never addressed the underlying sins of racism and genocide, of conquest and colonization, of ecocide that founded and maintained this country. It's gotten so silly. It's gotten so crazy on the vaccine front that now veterinarians are reporting that people are hesitant to vaccinate their dogs for things like rabies, kennel cough, and so forth. So now I got to worry about taking my dog to dog parks. I got to worry about my dogs playing with other dogs because of these anti-vax nut jobs who can't recognize the greatest scientific advancement in human history, vaccinations, something we've been doing as a part of this country's history going back to the Revolutionary War and George Washington insisting his soldiers get vaccinated for smallpox. It's part of our heritage, vaccination is. But it's gotten so silly, these people don't want to vaccinate their dogs. And in this study, they surveyed the people and they found that well over a third, 37%, would not vaccinate their dogs because they were afraid it would give them autism. They were afraid it would give their dogs autism, or, I don't know, call it pautism. It'd give them pautism. I guess that explains why my dogs have been so nonverbal. Yeah, pautism. No, I've got 4 dogs, and they're all vaccinated, and none of them suffer from pautism, although they do suffer from arthritis and Epstein-Barr syndrome, the human papillomavirus. How about lupus. All right, now let's look at what's happening in my neck of the woods out here in the state of Oregon, and more particularly looking all the way up to the northwest tip of the state of Oregon. That's where the beautiful city of Astoria, Oregon is, and my sister from another Mr. Carey, she lives up there as well. And there's, you go a little farther down the coast, you hit Seaside, and then you hit Tillamook, which is where they have that Tillamook cheese factory, if you like that Tillamook cheese. Beautiful north coast area of Oregon is represented by a Republican named Sec'ys Javadi. Well, up until now, because Sec'ys Javadi has announced on September 5th in a Substack entitled "Had Enough, I Have," where he writes, quote, "Let's not bury the lead. I'm switching parties. I'll be running for re-election as a Democrat." Wow, we've got an Oregon North Coast Republican switching to the Democratic Party, and he explains why. He says, quote, "By the end of the long session in June, my patience had worn thin. Every priority for Oregon's North Coast, nearly every one, ran into opposition from my own party. Protecting Medicaid benefits for the nearly 60% of children in Tillamook and Clatsop counties? Opposed. Keeping rural hospitals afloat? Opposed. Preserving students' access to books that reflect who they are? Opposed. Protecting the First Amendment rights of people different from ourselves? Opposed. Not because the policies were flawed, but because helping me deliver for my district didn't fit the Republican Party's agenda." End quote. He goes on to talk about how he gets the hate mail in his inbox, labeling him a vile criminal traitor. He talks about how he returned to his dental clinic to find one of his windows had been smashed out. And he says, "The Republican Party's message has been simple. We don't care what the problem is. Just vote no or else. And for me, that's a problem because I didn't run for office to be a rubber stamp. I ran to solve problems, to fill potholes, to keep hospitals open, to build housing families can actually afford, to keep our homes and neighborhoods safe." He goes on to talk about how he likes the Republican constituents in the North Coast and how he feels many of them share his values. They want decent jobs, safe streets, a fair shot for their kids, but the institutional Republican Party does not want that. It's a fantastic piece. I'll have a link to the Substack up on my show notes, but it's good to see an Oregon Republican switching to the Democratic Party. And one piece of this I think that's important to note is part of what got him to switch over is that he has a gay son. And he did not appreciate the attacks on gay and lesbian reading materials at the schools where his kids would go to school. So maybe a little case of conservative empathy. It happened to me, but we'll take it. Welcome to the Democratic Party, Sec'ys Javadi. Okay, the country baseline means it's time for our regular segment to boycott Idaho. All the reasons to avoid the handmade state. Now with 76 reasons, all enumerated on my blog at radicalrest.com/Idaho. Let's show these red states they can no longer treat our fellow Americans with such disdain for their constitutional rights. Avoid the handmade state. Boycott Idaho. And we got a few things in Boycott Idaho today. I want to start off with this story about how the Idaho Suicide Hotline is hanging up on teenagers. Yeah. So in this story, all across the country, mental health agencies have adopted this new crisis number 988. Like 911, right? 988 that you call for mental health crisis and get some counseling. But in the handmade state, teenagers and children calling that number are being hung up on when in distress or considering suicide or engaging in addictive or compulsive behaviors, or planning on running away, or any other mental health emergency. And it's all because Idaho legislators hate Planned Parenthood and transgender people. So last year, you see, to ensure that healthcare providers weren't providing contraception, abortion care, or transgender counseling to minors, the legislature passed Senate Bill 1329. Now, that bill mandates that the diagnosis, screening, examination, prevention, treatment, cure, care, or relief of any physical or mental health condition, illness, injury, defect, or disease cannot be performed on minors without parental consent. Now, I've already reported how one of the consequences of this parental consent law is that a teen girl who's raped by her father cannot report the rape to police that she needs to get that exception for an abortion, because the administration of a rape kit to collect the evidence is a screening for a physical condition for which she needs parents' permission. I've also covered the case of a pregnant 13-year-old girl who was going into labor, whom the doctors would not treat because there was no contact with a parent to be able to grant permission for her treatment. Now it's the kids that dial 988 whom the counselors can't speak to. Here's a quote from Alexander Koppel. He's a counselor who used to work the hotline, and he told the Idaho Capital Sun, quote, "We can hear a little bit, then we would basically say, we can't continue the conversation unless you have a parent there who can give consent. And then we'd have to end the call. And we have no way of knowing or following up to know if there was any help or support that was received." End quote. So the parental consent law, trying to stop trans kids from getting health care and young girls from getting abortions, is now stopping suicidal teenagers in Idaho from getting any mental health counseling. Now, the legislature says they're going to work this session to fix some of those problems within the law, but it just goes to show how little they thought through the law in the first place when they came to taking away people's rights. Another story for Boycott Idaho takes us into how the state manages to prosecute and punish those who might rape these young girls. This is a story of a young boy, age 14, who in 2017 begins sexually assaulting a girl of the age of 7. He's 14, she's 7. This continues through 2022 for 5 years until he's 19 and she's 12. Now she's 15 years old, and they've decided to prosecute the guy, so she publicly testifies against this guy, who's now a 22-year-old attending Brigham Young University as a baseball scholarship star. He was charged in 2 Idaho counties, Fremont County and Bingham County in southeastern Idaho, very heavily Mormon section of Idaho. But while he's charged in 2 counties, they offered him a plea deal. If he'd plead guilty to the charges in Fremont County, they would drop the charges in Bingham County. Oh, and one other part of the plea deal: he avoids getting placed on the sex offender registry. He will not have to register as a sex offender after admitting to 5 years of raping a preteen girl. 2 of those years, he was an adult. So, after taking the plea deal, the judge gives him a 5 to 10 year sentence and then suspends it. A suspended sentence means that the sentence hangs over your head, but you don't actually serve any jail time. Unless you violate your probation, and then you have to go and serve the 5 to 10 years jail time. So he doesn't have to serve the 5 to 10 years as long as he keeps his nose clean for the next 8 years that he was sentenced to for probation. If he can stay out of trouble till 2033, he won't have to go to prison for raping a preteen girl for 5 years. But But the judge did give him a 180-day local jail sentence and 200 hours of community service for this non-registered sex offender who raped a preteen girl for over 5 years. 6 months of a jail sentence. That's what you get from Idaho Justice for 22-year-old Candon Dahle, Dahle, who raped a preteen girl for 5 years. Doesn't have to go on the sex offender list. Meanwhile, homeless guys who got caught pissing out in a bush can get busted for indecent exposure and put on a sex offender list. So remember, in Idaho, you can rest assured, oh boy, they're going to keep your children safe from that critical race theory and that diversity, equity, and inclusion, and from that transgender ideology, and from any immigrants feeling welcome. But viruses, AR-15s, and rapists, not so much. And one other piece for our Boycott Idaho segment. Last week, the U.S. Supreme Court had decided to hear the lawsuit by Lindsay Hecox, who is a transgender woman track athlete at Boise State University. She sued 5 years ago against Idaho's HB 500, a law that bans all transgender athletes from competing in the sport of their gender. This sued and went through the district court, which enjoined Idaho's law, and the Ninth Circuit Court, which enjoined Idaho's law, which would allow her to keep running. So you took it all the way to the Supreme Court. Well, this week we got news that Lindsay Hecox has dropped her lawsuit and asked the Supreme Court to dismiss it with prejudice because of the negative attention that she has received from people like Chaya Libs of TikTok Ratchick and Riley fifth place swimmer Gaines, the Fox News talking heads. And she doesn't feel like she can continue her college career and protect her own health and safety with all this negative attention she's gotten from the case. So she has voluntarily sworn that she will not ever try to run track for Boise State University or any other school in the state of Idaho, allowing this HB 500 ban on transgender athletes to stand. So congratulations, Idaho. You bullied a trans girl into giving up athletics. Hope you're proud. Today in the Radical Rant, I want Americans to start recognizing and taking seriously that the Republican Party no longer exists. There is no longer a Republican Party of William F. Buckley and Ronald Reagan and Barry Goldwater and even George W. Bush. That party does not exist anymore. And what we are dealing with right now is a fascist uprising. We are dealing with a Nazi party in the United States, and they are not even trying to conceal it. They're not even trying to hide it. You see it in all their talking points, all their memes. They think America is a country for white Christian people, and everybody else needs to know their place. They really do believe this. You see it. Elon Musk lately has been, from South Africa and apartheid, of course. But Elon Musk has been posting these memes of discussing the birth rates of Western civilization and how the birth rates in Africa and Southeast Asia are far above what they call replacement levels. You know, you got to replace yourself when you die, right? So if you have 2 kids, those 2 kids replace you and your mate, right? So they're way above replacement levels. They're populating the world. And in the Western world, in Europe, in America, and Australia, our reproduction rates are below replacement levels. So they're slowly becoming fewer and fewer white people. A stat that was noted by one of the people he reposted that said in 1900, white people were like 36% of the global population, and today they're like 8% of the global population. And this is somehow a problem. This is a terrible thing to fear. These Nazis are racists. It's simple. They're racists and eugenicists who want to make America a white Christian nation. Now, I always laugh when I hear about this great replacement theory about how, America's trying to replace all the good white Christian Republicans by bringing in the brown foreigners who will vote Democratic. Because number one, why wouldn't they vote Republican? You're kind of giving it away by saying you're the party of white Christian nationalism. Why should they vote for you? When you're openly saying the world getting less white is a bad thing, why would non-white people want to vote for people who think that? And the other thing about whiteness and there being fewer white people, mathematically, unless you ban all interracial marriage, there are going to be fewer white people. Unless you ban all interracial marriage and you desperately decrease or greatly increase the birth rates of all white couples and decrease the birth rates of non-white couples, white people are going to decrease just because of the way we've defined white. In the racist definition here, and folks, being white is a racist definition. Whiteness is not a race. Caucasian is a race, but whiteness is a political structure. Whiteness is a social structure. And part of that structure says a white person plus a white person makes a white person. But a white person plus a non-white person makes a non-white person. And of course, a non-white person plus a non-white person makes a non-white person. So in the three possible configurations, two of them are going to lead to a non-white person. You can't win with those kind of numbers. And white hasn't always been the white that is the white of today. The original white was the English and the German and the French and the Dutch. It was the Northern European whites. And then when the Irish and the Slavs and the Italians started coming over to America, they weren't treated as white. They were treated as minorities. They got all the same problems. No Irish need apply. Anti-Italian sentiments. So great that we invented Columbus Day to try to make them feel better. Only over time did Irish and German and Spanish and Slavic and Russian be included into whiteness. So whiteness is something that is always going to decrease, and who cares? What difference does it make? It only makes a difference if you make it make a difference. But this is the mindset of these white Christian nationalists. They just recently had a convention. And when I talk about them not hiding it, they don't even bother to hide it. Their convention was called the Convention for National Conservatism, or NatCon for short, or even shorter, NatC. Like I said, they're not even trying to hide it. The Nazi convention. So at this Nazi convention, there was a speech that got a lot of attention because a current sitting U.S. senator spoke. His name's Eric Schmidt. Here are some of the things that Eric Schmidt said about America. Quote, America is not a universal nation. American principles are not abstractions. They are living, breathing things, rooted in a people and embodied in a way of life. Americans are a mix of the most adventurous, most courageous, most curious, and innovative of the English, Scotch, Irish, and continental Europeans who came as settlers and have spent hundreds of years building, fighting, and dying for a homeland for themselves and their descendants. And getting really close to the 14 words there. We must secure a future for white children, right? Continued, quote, we're a nation of settlers, explorers, and pioneers, born on the ocean waters that carried the first ships to our shores and forged in the crucible of a wild frontier. Our people tamed a continent, built a civilization from the wilderness, and wrote our nation's name in history. Let me just add that our people wiped out the inhabitants of a continent and the buffalo that they used to survive on, and our people built a civilization by enslaving Africans to do all the hard labor. And we wrote our nation's name in history, at least what the white people were doing at the time. Continuing from the Senator Schmidt, quote, our ancestors were driven here by destiny, possessed by urgent and fiery conviction, by burning belief, devoted to their cause and their God. The Continental Army soldiers dying of frostbite at Valley Forge, pilgrims struggling to survive in the hard winter soil of Plymouth, pioneers striking out from Missouri for the wild and dangerous frontier, and outnumbered Kentucky settlers repelling wave after wave of Indian warband attacks from behind their stockade walls, would be astonished to hear that they were only fighting for a proposition. They believed they were forging a nation, a homeland for themselves and their descendants. America, in all its glory, is their gift to us, handed down across generations. It belongs to us. It's our birthright, our heritage, our destiny. If America is everything and everyone, then it is nothing and no one at all. End quote. Okay, so the soldiers fighting for America would be shocked to learn that they were fighting for a proposition. You mean like Abraham Lincoln said at the Gettysburg Address, quote, 77 years ago, our fathers brought forth on this continent a new nation conceived in liberty and dedicated to the proposition that all men are created equal, end quote. No, they do not see it that way. They do not see this as a country that was founded on an idea, conceived in liberty, conceived around the idea of freedom for all men, equality for all men, which originally, sure, under the law was just white men, but who its descendants, both white and black, native and immigrant, fought to make sure those words applied to all of we the people. That it was with liberty and justice for all that included all of us. That the ideals of liberty and equality would be expanded and extended to all people. That is the beauty of America. That's what makes America different from every other country. We are not blood and soil. We are not descendants of the Gauls. We're not descendants of the Anglos or the Saxons. We are all the people that came to this country, either voluntarily or involuntarily, or resided in this country from before any white person ever set foot in it. That it's a country for all of us that's dedicated to ideals. And the fact that these people are so willing to come right out and say, this is just a country for us, the white Christian men. If that's not enough for you to understand we are no longer in normal times, it's no longer a time to reach across the aisle, that we do not have friends in the Republican Party. We have enemies in the Republican Party that seek to undo everything that America stands for, that seek to make America Jim Crow again, make America fascist again. We're not going to let them. We're not going to have it. We understand what America is all about. And if you want to hear more about what great Americans think is America is all about, I encourage you to listen all the way to the end of today's podcast.
And it goes down smooth. Hey!
But that's all the time we've got this week for the smoke session. We're running a little bit long, so the Radical Russ Show is produced, directed, researched, written, recited, posted, and catered by me, Radical Russ Belville, and governed by Creative Commons share-alike licensing. News clips and social media posts are reproduced under fair use copyright laws for commentary and analysis. My main theme is We Love the Herb by Herbal Nation, and interstitial music is by My Bass and My Drum Machine. Which brings me to our post-credits scene, and I've got to catch you up on our Tubi TV night. Check it out at hashtag Tubi TV Night if you're looking for some free TV and movies to watch. And first of all, I got to highly recommend 2018's Death of Stalin. Can't believe I missed this show. Amazing movie. Steve Buscemi plays Nikita Khrushchev, and who else is it? Jeffrey Tambor is in it. Michael Palin's in it. And it's just the death of Stalin in 1953 and how that affected the politics in the Soviet Union and all of the backstabbing and skullduggery that went on amongst all his cabinet members after his death as they tried to rise to power. And I don't know why that seemed appropriate to watch these days, but it's great. Check it out, Death of Stalin. Also on Tubi TV Night, I watched Superhero Movie from 2008. It's one of these spoof satire movies, you know, like the Scream spoofs or the Airplane spoofs or Naked Gun spoofs. It even has Leslie Nielsen and Robert Hayes in it, and it's pretty good. It's a good send-up of the superhero tropes. It gave me a few laugh-out-loud moments. It's definitely worth a watch. Check out Superhero Movie from 2008. And just to reminisce, I picked up the 1979 movie, The Warriors. Come out and play. I love The Warriors. If you've never seen The Warriors from 1979, it's a movie about gangs in New York City in the disco era. They even have roller disco gangs with Yankees uniforms on. And for anybody that's had to deal with the scourge of gang violence in the cities in the 21st century, I think you'll get a laugh about the violence of the gangs of 1979. Check it out, The Warriors from 1979. You can contact me by email at radicalruss@gmail.com. Call my message line at 877-RUSS-420. That's 877-877-420. And reach me on social media on Blue Sky as radicalruss.com. And nowhere else. You can support this podcast financially by donating to Radical Russ on Venmo, Rad Russ on Cash App, or via PayPal on my website at radicalruss.com. Get this podcast on Spotify, Apple Music, my website, or wherever you get your podcasts. Thanks for listening, and until next week, take care of each other.
Take a seed, you plant it, you grow it, you dry it, you roll it, you smoke it. You take a seed, you plant it, you grow it, you dry it, you roll it, you smoke it, and it goes down smooth.
Okay, still hanging out? Those of you want to know more about what great Americans think America is all about? Well, I have one more story that just didn't fit anywhere else, and I wanted to put it at the end because it has to do with the actor Tom Hanks. So Tom Hanks was set to get this award, this recognition, at the West Point Military Academy. And it's an award they give out to anyone who demonstrates the ideals of duty, honor, and country. And they wanted to give it to Mr. Hanks for his support of veterans and military causes over his 40-plus year career, as well as his portrayal of soldiers in movies like Saving Private Ryan and others, where he demonstrated the characteristics of duty, honor, and country. Well, this week, West Point announced that they are canceling the ceremony, and it's unclear whether or not the award is rescinded or will be given at another time, but basically they canceled the ceremony, and it's pretty transparent as to why. Because Tom Hanks is a Democratic donor. Tom Hanks supported Barack Obama in 2008, Hillary Clinton in 2016, and Joe Biden in 2020. And it seems pretty clear that this cancellation of the West Point honor is a form of political retribution against Tom Hanks for support of Democrats. And it once again shows how Donald Trump has such disdain for the military, for the concepts of honor, for the sacrifice and service that soldiers give. He's called us suckers and losers. He wouldn't go out and salute us in the rain because he was afraid he'd mess up his hair. He didn't want to be pictured with veterans who were amputees because it made him look bad. He's used our National Guard soldiers as props to pick up garbage and spread mulch in D.C. His absolute disdain for the military and for the ideals it stands for to rename it the Department of War, to talk about war fighting, to go on and extrajudicially kill people is not what we stand for. So I wanted to close the show today by playing a selection from the speech of General Douglas MacArthur in 1963, 5 years into the awarding of this medal, of this award for duty, honor, and country. I forget the name of it. But Douglas MacArthur spoke at West Point about duty, honor, and country. And as you listen to this, I want you to think about how foreign all of these concepts are to Donald Trump and the MAGA movement.
Duty, honor, country. Those three hallowed words reverently dictate what you ought to be, what you can be, what you will be. They are your rallying points to build courage when courage seems to fail, to regain faith when there seems to be little cause for faith, to create hope when hope becomes forlorn. Unhappily, I possess neither that eloquence of diction, that poetry of imagination, nor that brilliance of metaphor to tell you all that they mean. The unbeliever will say they are but words, but a slogan, but a flamboyant phrase. Every pedant, every demagogue, every cynic, every hypocrite, every troublemaker, and I am sorry to say some others of an entirely different character, will try to downgrade them even to the extent of mockery and ridicule. But these are some of the things they do. They build your basic character. They mold you for your future roles as the custodians of the nation's defense. They make you strong enough to know when you are weak and brave enough to face yourself when you are afraid. They teach you to be proud and unbending in honest failure, but humble and gentle in success. Not to substitute words for action, not to seek the path of comfort, but to face the stress and spur of difficulty and challenge. To learn to stand up in the storm, but to have compassion on those who fall. To master yourself before you seek to master others. To have a heart that is clean, a goal that is high. To learn to laugh, but yet never forget how to weep. To reach into the future, yet never neglect the past. to be serious, yet never to take yourself too seriously, to be modest, so that you will remember the simplicity of true greatness, the open mind of true wisdom, the meekness of true strength. They give you a temper of the will, a quality of the imagination, a vigor of the emotions, a freshness of the deep springs of life, a temperamental predominance of courage over timidity, of an appetite for adventure over the love of ease. They create in your heart the sense of wonder, the unfailing hope of what next, and the joy and inspiration of life. They teach you in this way to be an officer and a gentleman.